So at 9:30, let's move on to the last topic of the day. Let's talk about Ivy. I'm sure that this could be a whole new thing, but maybe we can just
Oh yeah, that sounds
so we
like
can
a
move
whole
into some other
episode.
stuff. But Ivy, again, it's related to the sack jacket because in that same vein, it's one of those things where like it doesn't really go out of style. Maybe some things have changed, slim fit. Maybe we add in some darts, whatever. But Ivy is still something that's really, really popular, at least for us, because for those of you who don't know, Ivy League style is basically what it sounds like. It is a style of people who went to Ivy League schools, and specifically the heyday is technically like the late 50s to like the 60s, right?
So it still looks very like mid-century.
Yeah, but there's always other interpretations of it. And then there's like 70s Ivy. There's still like rugged Ivy later on. If we talk about casual stuff. For me personally, in terms of tailoring, I look after, or in terms of like suiting full sartorial outfits, not as casual. I look at, like 1930s to 40s Ivy League style, where it's again wider lapels, wider trousers, because I still love wearing pleated trousers. That is something that I can't really get into in terms of like regular Ivy because I'm also kind of thick and I like having the room. I've talked repeatedly on the blog and in the podcast how I have like one of my most self-conscious things is how big my thighs are, and I have a thing with like. I don't I don't like it when my when my thighs are visible, or like my
thighs are visible. Yeah.
When they hug, when the trousers hug
when they pass through your trousers,
when they clip through your trousers.
That's a clip, baby. He wears like torn fishnets under like all of his trousers.
And he likes.
I just wear cutoffs because there's dozens of us.
And that's an image.
There are dozens of us.
Oh, thank you, MJ.
But so like Ivy, like not all of Ivy has like it doesn't appeal to me completely. But like the 40s ones, where there's a lot more fuller ties. They're wearing spear point collars, also really great OCBDs, and thicker wider ties compared to like the 60s, kind of look.
Earthier ties.
Yeah. So like a lot of like what I dress like, because I think even like Fred Astaire kind of has a kind of like an Ivy League look in a sense, It has like when you look at it, it's definitely
he has like a proto Ivy League look, right? He has the
exactly
Ivy look then, and he kind of kept that for his look,
which is what I look at. Jimmy Stewart also has a very similar look.
Because Jimmy Stewart was actually an Ivy League boy in the 30s. I think he was Princeton. I think he went to Princeton for architecture of all things in class of 32. So
that's
so he
why
makes sense as Ivy.
That's why I've never had like when I talk about vintage, even though I did experiment with like swing ties, very when you look at like some of my old outfits, which I'm sure we're going to get into in a future episode when I talk about my style evolution more specifically, I kind of immediately went to stripe ties, specifically like block stripe ties and foulard ties, because they looked, not only did they just look cooler to me than wearing like a fucking like swing tie with a fucking wolf on it, even though Spencer loves that shit, or like a Dali tie. But it's just there's something about it that looks so casual, despite how boring or conservative they may look to other stuff. And that's what got me into like Ivy, and then with like 60s Ivy, I'm just not a fan of super slim ties, even though I have a couple. The tie what I was wearing today might be like kind of like late 50s, early 60s, because it's slim, but it's not super slim. When you're looking at it. But yeah, Ivy League style is a great thing to do, and it's a great way to kind of, guide yourself in what you want your classic menswear look to be. I think all of us have a sense of Ivy style that is represented.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, obviously you pointed out different nationality, like French Ivy or whatever, or like 60s
I'm gonna pee.
Ivy.
Keep talking.
You got pee. All right. There's different types, but honestly, I've just become so inundated where it's just like everything is Ivy. It's like, oh, that's Ivy, that's Ivy. It's like super casual or just like casual for tailoring. It's just all some version of Ivy, and that's how I dress. You could make a case of some version of Ivy, whether it's like the Take Ivy 2020 version of wearing sweatpants and a crew neck and sneakers to class, or like when I have to dress up wearing an OCBD knit tie and a sack suit, and like, I don't know, penny loafers maybe if I want to, and white socks. If I want to, but I probably won't. I probably wear brown wingtips and some solid socks. But if I have that choice, But it's all it's all rose-colored glasses. Just everything's Ivy in some version. You can make a case for it, and
If
it's hard to
everything's
see.
Ivy, then nothing.
Nothing is Ivy. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's Ivy. Nothing Ivy. Blue Ivy. It's all the same.
Poison Ivy.
Yep. Don't forget her.
I think,
Vanilla
guys.
Ivy.
So we've talked about how we like Ivy for the various details that are contained within the genre, but I think we should also consider and perhaps talk about the ethos behind the Ivy.
Well,
Because
yeah,
Ivy was created. Yeah, Ivy was created for to fit a particular purpose of these wealthy college students from the 20s and 30s that we talked about, and yeah. So, what do you think the ethos is behind?
Well, I was going to say the reason
might that be attractive?
We're all drawn to it, and the reason that we all incorporate it, even if maybe we're not all wearing like repped stripes and OCBDs every day, is just the kind of, I mean, it's such a buzzword. It's the fucking name of Ethan's blog or whatever, but the Sprezzatura or whatever, that is kind of like inherent in it. It was worn by college students, and even though it was worn by college students, 50, 60 years ago, they were still college students, and they still wanted to dress comfortably and look cool in class. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the comfortable and cool and like sort of distance themselves from their what like dads would wear.
They're like Madison Avenue like dads.
In that sense, there's a bit of a punk element in there too,
right?
Yes, Jason, come in. Yeah, welcome in, brother.
I think the punks would be incredibly mad at you for calling a bunch of Ivy League yuppies.
Yeah,
but the guys who created it,
you gotta be careful here.
Guys who wore the Ivy League into the 50s and 60s when it was mainstream.
Welcome to 2020. This is punk rap now.
I mean, I guess if you consider Tom Leahy punk rock, then yes.
The world's our oyster.
Yeah.
But the idea of stuff that we consider to be essentials in the Ivy League look, like penny loafers. That was a Norwegian fishing shoe, originally intended to be worn around the home and nothing more, right? But no, I'm wearing it with my three-piece.
And we found it ironic.
Yeah. So I'm wearing this shit with all my formal wear. Suck it.
And I think we all have this this feeling of not wanting, not necessarily the dad point, but just like we're aware of what this is, what it is to like dress up in like shiny worsted wool suits that are 2-button and weird slim fitting and just like look like, I don't know, some like conservative yuppies. So just like we're aware of these connotations, kind of thing we talked about before. So how could we make it a little more approachable? Wear casual outerwear over these like flannel or cotton suits with maybe not white poplin shirts that are French cut. Just again, varying up these details, make them a little more gritty, a little more textured, and just like that's inherently Ivy. So I think that's just why we lean into it so hard.
Definitely. I mean, again, echoing the whole idea of being punk rock, and even though it technically is not punk rock in the sense of like punks, but
I mean, it is in 2020.
But a lot of punk guys, or ex-punk guys who work in the menswear industry or menswear enthusiasts like Ivy. That it's just like Tony Sylvester, who is literally the lead singer of Turbo Negro, a heavy metal band. He loves his rap stripes, he loves the OCBDs, he loves his foulards, his sack style jackets, or whatever. So there's just this fun appeal to it that is simultaneously dressed up, but not dressed up.
It's also attracting the ire of people, observers who don't know better, and really wallowing in that as well. So to that point, I think the crew neck sweater, which has been adopted as standard loungewear amongst Ivy Leaguers and fans of the Ivy League look, and often you also wear that over a shirt and tie, and when you do that, you can't see the shirt and tie. So I can imagine posting it on like the Alpha M forum, and they'll be like, "Bro, I can't see your tie. Like, what the fuck?" And then you're like, "Yes, that's the fucking point. Go fuck
yourself." Or just
yourself.
like outside of like wearing a tie and a dress shirt, just like having a crew neck sweatshirt. That's very punk rock.
I am wearing this tie for no reason. I know you can't see it, and I actively don't care about it.
Yeah, fuck you.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do? Do you completely as if it was under a regular jacket, or do you have like the tie kind of popping up a little bit over the crew neck? What do you do? Huh?
If you look at old pictures of people on campus, there's they wore it over the tie and also like deliberately pulled up on the front, so you really basically didn't see the tie except for the very, very top of it.
Listen, we're all about, showing and not like telling in that sense. Like you can see, wearing a tie, but it's not like saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm wearing a tie."
I'm not being demonstrable about it. I think is the
We're not tie guys.
To the other end of the spectrum, like if we put the Ivy guy wearing crew neck sweater that completely covers his shirt and tie on one end of the spectrum, on the other end of the spectrum, you'd have someone who wears like a tie tack and a collar clip, both way too high on his tie.
Yep.
Yeah, and a shirt garter.
Yeah, and a shirt garter because you got to keep that shirt tucked. You don't want to get cucked by a man with a shirt tucked in.
Right. You don't want to get cucked by a man with a shirt tucked in.
Yeah, and if the past few weeks have proven anything, it's that we absolutely love trolling people who wear tie tacks and tie clips way too high at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't get it. Why?
It's one of those things that people, they do it because they think it's something that they have to do, but then in reality, like it's like people who wear tie tacks and tie bars way too high often are also wearing suits for the fact that they're wearing the suit. They don't know anything about it. They're just doing it because that's what they thought looked cool to them.
Yeah, and
they're not wearing suits. People like that, they're not wearing suits as an expression of their own personality. They're wearing it as a manifestation of their aspirations. It's what they want to be. They want to be that guy from Harvey Specter's his name, the guy from Suits. They want to be him.
That is
they want to be
Suits.
Yeah.
Our best friend Harvey Specter.
They're clearly not.
He's a reader of the blog.
Reader of the blog, Harvey Specter.
Yeah.
Owner of the donut.
But people are the ones that swoon over every stupid invention that's like, oh, how to keep your socks up.
Yeah.
Like, what? Shut the fuck up.
This is a shirt that has no buttons. Finally.
It's got no buttons. It's no buttons. Also, it's liquid. It's waterproof, sweatproof, and it doesn't die.
Listen, guys, these shoes are all zipper. I gotta tell you about it.
Good lord. But yeah, go back to
I hate having to tie your shoes and getting cucked by a guy in Velcro.
Well, listen to this.
Well, the thing is,
don't you hate getting an entire punch bowl all over your shirt frequently? Don't you hate
magnetic collar made of plastic?
Don't you wish in those moments that shit would just repel all completely off?
I'd buy it.
Plastic.
Kiyoshi right here says a magnetic collar shade. That's another one we don't like.
Yes.
Because all of our stuff is soft as a child's behind.
Yeah.
Hey guys,
do you have experience touching child's behinds, Ethan?
Nope. I'm hanging up the phone right now. But no, to go back.
I like this code.
It's just it's. I wish more people could get into it. In the broader sense. They're not looking at it from looking like a prep school guy or just wearing navy blazer with khakis. With a white OCBD and like a Brooks Brothers #2 rep or whatever. Like that could be going a little too far, but the ideas behind Ivy, again, looking at what everyone wore back then. Look, there's a great book, Hollywood and the Ivy Style. It's they weren't just wearing, again, khakis, blue blazer, boat shoes. They were wearing loafers with gray flannel suits or fucking foulard ties with OCBDs or club collars. There's a lot of stuff that goes into Ivy League style that can be applied. That it's. By design, it's middle of the road, right? It was the time these people didn't want to wear, college students didn't want to wear 50s bold cut suits, and they also didn't want to dress like hippies or whatever, right? It was very just safe, and that is the case today. But because of the heterogeneity of style nowadays, Ivy or true Ivy or casual Ivy, rugged Ivy, all that together presents a very interesting way of getting into classic menswear without having to go the whole bespoke Italian tailored, route. And I wish more people will see it, because again, when people get into menswear, they always go for like, okay, I'm gonna wear like, it's best when you see people get the whole like custom suit thing where like the pockets are like they have like, or the buttons holes have contrasting stitching,
like the felt or the
lining,
felt under the collar.
It's such a meme.
Is,
it's crazy.
Yes. With like Carpe Diem on it or something.
And it's like, you're going too far. Like, well, see, modern is all about being novel. You got to stand out, right? Or, where everything has to be fucking bespoke and everything's got to be a spread collar. Everything's got to be like a 7-fold tie because that's like the best of the best. Well, that's fine if you're into it. Again, there's nothing wrong with that if you're into it. But like, to me, as a viewer and also enthusiast, it always inherently is stuffy. Like, it's just so
and
much.
We hate stuffiness.
And we
it's a menswear podcast.
And again,
a menswear podcast around that idea.
Again, not looking like a prep school kid, but taking the ideas behind Ivy, where it was like, you're wearing thrifted or secondhand military chinos that you bought, you cut the hem off, you're rolling them up because they're surplus or whatever. Wearing it with OCBDs, which were a casual shirt back then.
Yeah, but they gotta be slim.
Yeah, but it's like like just the bare minimum, like inherently looks super cool.
What are things that you guys
maybe,
well, I'll just hold on. I have a question. Yep. What are things that you guys do that like not inherently Ivy, but like instead of, I know Spencer, you don't wear a lot of white shirts, but are there things you subvert to make them a little more casual in your everyday dress? Things you might stay away from that might be perceived as too formal for your vibe in how you guys dress day to day?
I try not to restrict myself too much. Like day to day, I mean, day to day, I generally just would like go with an OCBD or whatever. But I mean, sure. I still have more casual sphere points that I wear all the time.
Yeah.
See, for me though, I think my way of doing it is like I wear loafers with everything. I try and wear as much as possible, and that's one way. Again, I'm not wearing like the beef roll casual LHS ones with suits. I'm still wearing like full strap paint loafers or my tassels. But there's an idea of wearing loafers that is Ivy. And you're wearing it with lighter colored socks, white, cream. I think that's super, super cool. Wearing chinos with stuff is Ivy. Yes. Not wearing cream pants, but wearing literal chinos. I think that's what really makes things Ivy. And of course, instead of opting for like the English style suit, which some people like. When they're doing suits, I think soft shoulder 3-roll too with patch pockets, especially patch pockets with a flap. That's cool. And that's one way to incorporate Ivy into the thing. Like there's lots of ways to, incorporate this kind of stuff.
How about you guys? Do you do anything like that?
There's also a way to incorporate it in the sense that the Ivy League was, to an extent, about buying nice tailored clothing, but sort of not really giving a shit about it. I'm looking at the old Ivy style, the Ivy style write-up, the essay on the rise and fall of the Ivy League book. And at one point they talk about how in the 30s there was the thing known as the Ivy League hat, which was in their description a soft felt hat battered almost beyond recognition into a shape never conceived by hat manufacturers. So it was like a hat.
Awesome. That's so good.
Yeah.
I mean,
so you see the picture. It's got like it's like creased. It's like clearly sat on. It's like the brim's all the way down, and it's got like creased.
Put a picture in the stuff.
Because there's a lot of Ivy stuff like that. Like this shirt that I'm wearing right now, the back of the collar is like very worn. I need to stitch this up, but that's the thing. Guys would take like sandpaper to the back of their collars to like wear them in.
It was the original ripped jeans.
Yeah, or they would
the cuffs of their OCBD.
They would wear they would like tape their shoes together if like the heel was starting to come off or whatever.
Very sprezzatura.
There's also the phenomenon of the white shoe boys, which was according to Ivy style, it's the guy who wears the most disgusting, dirty white bucks.
That's literally like my favorite thing. Is to get, like, white shoes and just make them disgusting.
That turns him on.
And of course, I mean, there's the whole Ivy tradition of like go to hell pants or whatever, go to hell jackets stuff, like which were either very like bold patterns or colors, or like embroidered with something. So there's a lot of Ivy that is just kind of intentionally making things a little bit more casual, or
And
just
yeah,
saying,
we've
like,
talked about
fuck
it with
you.
like tailoring, and like people wore suits. That's just what they wore. So like nowadays, you sell someone a suit, like I don't want to open up the pockets. I want them intact, but people lived in it, and so like having the slouchy, saggy pockets. That's also a little Ivy thing as well.
So we
Just like
started on
stuffing
this.
shit.
Yeah, so we started on this tangent by talking about ways we could make Ivy items more casual to modern eye. And now that we brought this up, I think one of the ways to do it is to actually use your shit. Like if you have stuff, if you're going to class, put notebooks in those pockets, like stuff them, make them misshapen. Yeah, pens here and there. Like when you go into class, like just to like rub like. If you have to take off your jacket for whatever, it's too hot. Just roll. Just don't carefully like hang your jacket up, like baby it, bring it to the like.
Oh,
the
it
back
started
of the
raining
hang it on
today. I
the hook.
literally threw my jacket into my bag.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like
Yeah.
I just pushed it and like shoved it into it.
Yeah.
I feel
like,
sad that I'm not wearing tailoring on the daily because, like, I see these old movies and, like, again, they're putting papers and newspapers inside of the the exterior jacket pockets. I'm like, I wish I could do that, but I don't really have tailored jackets in my usual daily stuff anymore. But that's just a nice look.
If you treat your Ivy stuff the same way you treat like a military jacket, like an M60, like you would an M65 or some sort of work outfit, yeah, I think that goes a long way to making it look more acceptable in the modern context. You're not doing it for the you're not doing it to look powerful or important. You're just wearing a different sort of jacket.
And
be mindful of and be mindful of weather. Be mindful of weather as well. I think and climate.
Yeah.
Nothing worse than the guy who you see at the cookout in the middle of August wearing the suit because he thinks it makes him look alpha. Yeah, take that shit off and don't be and don't baby it. Take that shit off,
Don't
roll
be
the ball,
weird,
and
man.
yeah,
You've heard
don't
it
be
here
weird.
first.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. You know, when we talk about Ivy and everything, it's just when you look at like Ivy style, and especially again the creator of Ivy style who created Trad Band. I'm gonna link. Where is it? Trad-man.com. I'm trying to find it.
Jeremy in the chat said that he's Ivy because he's lazy as fuck.
Yeah, I was just trying to get to that. I agree with Jeremy because like I just don't shine my shoes, and it's just a lazy thing. But that's like you get your patina, you live in your clothing, and so look, it's a little Ivy detail. Look at that, you're fun.
Yeah, and to an extent that might be how the whole thing starts too. Before the Ivy League look became a thing, I'm sure rich parents were sending their kids off in like really nicely pressed three-piece suits and like really shiny shoes. But after a while, the kids were like, "Yeah, like fuck." Like after a while, as just like we do today, the kids developed a pile of clothes at the foot of their beds. They start polishing their shoes out of sight of their parents, and from things like that.
Can we all agree that Trad Man would be a horrible superhero?
Huh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I find it so interesting to see, like, when we look at, like, I take Ivy and everything else and stuff. These guys abuse and wore their clothing, and they had this kind of casual air to it. But like when you look at people on Ivy style, they don't have.
They don't look casual.
Yeah,
because it comes as it's the result. I think.
Try.
Yeah.
Ivy League, you can't try to look Ivy. Ivy just happens.
Yeah, exactly. Ivy is the result of not trying. That's how the Ivy League look originated.
And like that's the whole Crocs thing that I do. With the Crocs, it's like I don't care enough to like. Why I'm wearing a suit, but why do I need
your Crocs are the shit posting of your life.
Yeah, but why do I need to sit here and put like fucking nasty ass Alan Edmonds shoes on because I'm wearing a suit? Like, I'm standing all day. I'm gonna be in shoes that are basically tires.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we could get into Ivy League style or more stuff like Rugged Ivy in the future, but I think, overall, it's kind of a great way to incorporate Americana that's kind of dressy, kind of not dressy at the same time. And if you have a flair of punk rock to it, it becomes something that's very.
I gotta trademark that.
Yeah, you do. But like, it's just a nice way to kind of do things, and it's always, again, people take inspiration from Ivy of all kinds and a variety of different styles. The Japanese do it really well. We all do it very well, and it's
So
very
we've heard
nice.
it here. The Japanese, they do chores and they do Ivy well.
Yeah, and here's it's a good example. I want to close this with a weird with a quote from Christian Svensvold's book where he wrote. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but the guy who created Ivy Style is a fucking weirdo.
Yes.
He has a book called "These Are Our Failures," and it's a 10,000 words dark. I'm gonna read his thing here. So while he says it's a dark comedy set in the world of apocalyptic preparation, as seen through the lens of menswear and the decline of elegance.
Oh my god, that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Tension is killing me.
Yeah, the title comes from an old anecdote about Beau Brummel regarding cravats that, if they failed to fall immediately into place, would have to be sent out again for restarching. And this is one thing where, if Beau Brummel would have a Twitter, it's full of like sarcasm and dry wit. He doesn't really, like, fuck off, dude. With restarching your fucking cravats and shit. Anyway, in the story, the title takes another meaning as two men from opposite sides of the political spectrum come to a consensus that Western civilization is a catastrophic failure.
It's a modern day
Here we
Western
go.
story.
The narrator is a disillusioned magazine writer on an adventure, meets an anima figure who guides him. Yeah. Who is it? Which waifu is it? Who guides him to a new life off the grid, and here it is. I took the whole experience as a sign that something had to change. I began listening to my inner voice so long drowned out in the cacophonous chatter of the way we live life now.
That's a bad sentence.
I see now that the apocalyptic desolation I saw in the Alaskan landscape upon first arriving was merely a projection of my own inner emptiness when torn from New York and the internet. Those two co-conspirators of my parasitic existence and neurotic fear that if taken from me, I'd be left with nothing. All fear is ultimately based on the ego's dread of its own destruction, and yet the ego's obliteration and rebirth as something transcendent is precisely what the suffering human organism needs. And great is the man who can bear the screaming temper tantrum of his ego when he wakes up one fateful morning and says, "Today, you illusory construct of hope and fear, is the day you die in order that I may live."
Lame.
Gross.
I'm soaking wet right now.
We need to we should pirate this book and read it. That could be like, we could do a reading series on the podcast. That could be a bonus episode.
Yeah, this
armchair.
is, it's very unfortunate that, this idea of casual, what, like, go to hell, fuck off kind of stuff has become this kind of like, I mean, it is sense like go to hell, but they're talking about Western civilization. They're inherently becoming stuffy and owning up to it. When back in the day, it didn't fucking matter. It started
out as a way for rich boys to not be stuffy unlike their parents, but now it seems to have turned and become a way for modern guys to be particularly stuffy when it comes to like Western civilization and dress.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like you can look at like
jazz and he can't stand Dua Lipa, whatever.
The Ivy League look is tough because it's not something that you can just kind of take like the requisite pieces and like be like, I mean, we this is what we're talking about. Like you could look at like fucking Tucker Carlson who wears blazers and rep ties and OCBDs, but I mean, he doesn't really look like Ivy.
No.
Really,
yeah. I mean, he has one of those punchable faces. So.
Yeah. It's funny because he does make the same face like all the time. Like he has one confused face.
Yeah, that confused face.
Like his mouth is kind of like hanging open.
So we're all
just
gonna die.
Yeah.
You're gonna let us all die.
Yeah.
So he has.
Yeah,
he has,
again, it's really unfortunate because when you look back at it, also, I mean, it's one of those things where like they consider it like the least you can do, which is still the most someone can do for like compared to other stuff. Like it's a good way to put yourself above like streetwear or something, which is why, as we talked about last week, the idea that streetwear and hype culture and skatewear creeping into this menswear space, I think, is inherently good because it'll further show that these things aren't lifestyles anymore. You're not going to be a wasp. You're not going to be the guy drinking the Ruinies. Like, it can be a regular dude who likes, fucking 100 Gex or fucking Brockhampton, and be into wearing like fucking chinos and a blazer. And of course, there's a whole like lowhead culture too, right? That's where it's co-opting this. Maybe that's more preppy than Ivy, whatever. But like I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you can appreciate both. You don't have to sign up for one or the other, but
both, and that's again, hope. I mean, again, we might be on the more conservative end of the spectrum if you include those other people into it. But I think as a whole, we're very accepting, and it's cool to see reinterpretations because my whole goal with the blog, again, I talked about this before, is the idea that you don't have to dress like me, but the way I dress shouldn't come as a surprise.
You don't have to dress like me, but you do.
So stop reading.
It shouldn't come as it doesn't come as a surprise to you, or it shouldn't be that weird because these things are just fucking clothes, and I treat them as such.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the tenets of true Ivy. And again, hey, not. Other than Spencer and Matt, we're not white here. We don't have that kind of sense of like ownership over like, well, this is how like my family's been dressing for a long time. Not saying that they do, but like we literally are in a thing where people of like our background would not dress up in that particular thing in the past.
Yeah, we don't have a history of going to Ivy League school.
Exactly. So I mean, maybe if you think
I can't read, so
yeah. What's reading?
I can't read.
I can't.
I am very elite here.
I can't swim.
I can't swim.
But even you made me think of something though, because Ivy League schools are still around, and but the demographics have changed so much, and all of that I thought of, will we see a new Ivy style, a style that's distinct to Ivy League colleges, but
no.
No, I was going to say no. I thought about it, but no.
There's a tangent of that where it's like Kevin. Who's that comedian? Kevin Nealon, I think that's his name. He has like a YouTube channel where he like walks with comedians. He was walking with Colin Jost, and like who went to Harvard, but he said something like he would never wear like a Harvard T-shirt or anything like that. Like, so there's like an aversion for people who do go to these schools. They don't want to. Like most people who have like self-awareness, they don't want to necessarily rep the brand or anything like that, or like there's a lot of that. It's not even in Ivy League schools, like advertise on top of things. Like that's it was Young Chomsky. He said something like that. But
I think it's going to be a lot more ethereal than that, though. Will there ever be a style that was developed out of the Ivy League colleges but out of elite colleges in the United States, but it's nothing to do. It's distinct to the colleges, but it has nothing to do with like tweeds or tailoring. Not that. I know that.
In general, we're not really seeing new styles crop up. Well, I think nowadays, we're finally reaching a point in fashion where a lot of it's just recontextualizing things, like e-girl, e-boy fashion, soft fashion is kind of like a modern take on like the 90s. It's not inherently new, right? It's not like how Ivy was before, where no one did that prior to that kind of thing. In terms of wearing chinos with blazers and such, military chinos. So, we're living in that kind of post age where it's I don't think that we're gonna have like an Ivy League thing, like college students wearing a specific look. We have like the Midtown uniform, which is kind of related to it, which kind of caters into it. But it's
which thank God Midtown doesn't really exist anymore.
People are wearing now.
Yeah, exactly. The new thing is what the Zoom shirt with underwear on the bottom, right? Yeah.
I don't think there'll ever be a new Ivy style as well for the.
Well, no, just because also, I mean, it's like we've talked about everything is
used to be.
Well, also everything is just so atomized now. There's no like, I don't know. There's no like default style anymore. I mean, there is, but there's it's
like we said before,
and also these colleges were not as isolated as they used to be.
Exactly.
In the heyday of Ivy style 20s and 30s, like Princeton was its own world essentially. It's like no one really could break into that.
Well, yeah, and now
they joined on Facebook.
That doesn't exist. It's not like college students are on their own island like they used to be. So they can't really be a distinct college style anymore.
Yeah. But I hope that Ivy, that we see a return to this. As the more we see, Japanese Americana come into the foreground and influence American style more. Again, it's small, but it's still there. Whether we see Drakes and Berg and Berg do their take on Ivy. To again, Noah Clothing and Rowing Blazers. It's my hope that Ivy kind of comes back, and it is. But that we are able to kind of take these things out of like the waspy context and wear it kind of back the way it was. You slap it on and that's kind of it, right? Because like Spencer said, we don't really have a default outfit, and we do, but it doesn't get any attention because by default, it is no one's trying to just blend in anymore. And if you are, you're blending in and no one's talking about you. Nowadays people are trying to just stand out, and I hope that Ivy is the way for classic menswear to come back. And it is kind of the gateway for people to kind of get into classic menswear because, again, it's so accessible. The jacket, like we just talked about previously, can go, you can do an approximation of Italian, you can do an approximation of American, you can do an approximation of British, like countryside, whatever. It's a great way to kind of get in there and make a great baseline for what your style within classic menswear is going to be, whether it goes skate, whether it goes bespoke, or whatever. That's what's the beauty about true Ivy League style. And that's 10:06. Fantastic.